The next question put to the Shaykh, حفظه, is, he says that when the people of the Sunnah become strange and small in number, and their opposers become very, very large in number, then what is it that will console and reassure the people of the truth? So once again, this is a very pertinent issue, that we find ourselves perhaps small in number. We find that the people of misguidance and opposition are tremendous in number, and not just of one type, but of so many different categories and orientations, and every single one of them, we see that they have opposition and hatred against Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, even if they actually make alliances with each other for that purpose. So you will see very often that many of the factions of misguidance, even though they have oppositions to each other, when it comes to opposing the people upon the Salafi da'wah, you will see that they will actually make alliances and they will forget their differences. And so this type of enmity and hatred and opposition is tremendous from all of the various, parties and fractions. For example, I'll give you an example. We see many of the Khawarij who used to be in Saudi Arabia. Being Khawarij, you would expect that they are opposed to those who are the liberalists, right? Because you have now these liberalists, these munafiqeen who are present, and they are trying to call to liberalism. But what we found is that when they failed in their techniques and methods they were trying to use, which is basically trying to cause unrest and revolution, they realized we simply can't do this. The whole setup is such that we simply do not have the means and the power and the resources and the numbers in order to create revolutions and to take power. So what's the best way forward? The best way forward basically is to make alliances. Let's make alliances with the Sufis. Let's make alliances with the Tabligis. Let's make alliances with the liberalists. Right? This is what they actually began to start writing in their books. And people who started following this methodology, like Salman al-Awd and people like that, that is what they eventually started doing. So in the 1990s, they were calling to this, Hakimiyya, Khuruj, Takfir, revolution, right? And now you find them 10, 15, 20 years later, they are basically now, calling to a civic Islam, uniting with, working with the liberalists and things of that nature. So these people, you see, because they were never upon the Salafi da'wah, they do not have something firm to stick to. And so like an ocean tosses you in whichever direction, whichever way the flow and the momentum is going, you will just go in that direction. So if you want numbers, then you will, because you have no scruples or principles, then now you will start compromising and working with the Sufis, with the Tabligis, with the Ikhwanis, with the liberalists. You will even take money from non-Muslims if they support your cause, right? So this is the nature of the opposition and the enmity to the people of this da'wah. So the question is, when the people of the Sunnah are small in number, they become strangers, and their opposers are very many, then what is the thing that will actually console them and make the affair easy for them? And the Shaykh gives a very beautiful answer. He gives us with three things. He gives us three things to think about that will give us reassurance and firmness upon this way. He says that there are some times which come upon the people, and in some places where the desires overwhelm the people and the misguidance increases, and as a result of which the people of truth, the people of the Sunnah, become very small in number, and they feel very, very strange. They feel very, very strange. He says that what will console them, what will give them strength, is three things, and I'll summarize the 3 points. The first thing that will console them is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِم مِّنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ وَحَسُنَ أُولَٰئِكَ رَفِيقًا. Whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger, then they will be with the ones upon whom Allah has bestowed His favor from the prophets and the truthful and the martyrs and the righteous, and what an excellent companionship they are. So the Shaykh says, when a person finds himself feeling strange in his town or in his city or in his land, that he is the only person of the Sunnah adhering to the rope of Allah Azza wa Jal, and he finds strangeness, and he finds very few people are sticking to that way, then he should remember that so long as he is upon this way, what is his companionship? He is actually in the company of the prophets and the martyrs and the truthful and the martyrs and the righteous. And so when he, and this is something that Ibn al-Qayyim also speaks about as well, that when he recalls that this path that he's traversing, on this same path are the prophets and messengers and the righteous and the martyrs and the truthful and so on and so forth, then this strangeness, this wahsha that he feels, all of a sudden it disappears when he sees that actually he does have a companionship. Even though it is not physically present, but that is nevertheless, it is companionship. It is like when you sit down and you have present with you books, you have the books of tafsir, you have the books of aqidah, you have the books of the usul, and you sit there and those books are in your presence, you feel there's a type of company which is present. The authors of those works, you feel that as if you are in their presence. So when you acquire this ilm and you act upon this ilm, then you know that your company, even though it is not physically present, it is not present there in front of you, but nevertheless that is your company. And so the wahsha, the strangeness, it then disappears and you become strong in your resolution. The Shaykh says, you become firm and you do not fear the blame of any blamers in the path of Allah Azza wa Jal. And nor will you be shaken or disturbed by the many which go into destruction, and nor by the few who are actually upon the way that you are following. So this is the first thing that you remember. Who is your company in this way of the Salafi way, the Salafi da'wah? The second thing that he mentions that a person should remember is that he mentions the long hadith of the 70,000 who will enter paradise without any reckoning, which is related by Ibn Abbas and others. And within that hadith, a long hadith, there occurs the statement of the Messenger of Allah فَرَأَيْتُ النَّبِيِّ وَمَعَهُ الرَّحَطُ وَالنَّبِيِّ وَمَعَهُ الرَّجُلُ وَالرَّجُلَانِ وَالنَّبِيِّ وَلَيْسَ مَعَهُ أَحَدٌ. He says, I saw a prophet and with him was a group of people, like from 3 to 10 people, and another prophet and with him was one man or two men, and a prophet and there was not anyone with him at all. So this now is on Yawmul Qiyamah, and the followers of the prophets will come. So here we see these examples of these prophets, and these prophets, these are prophets of Allah Azza wa Jal. They are superior to us, and they were sent to an entire nation, to their nation of thousands or tens of thousands or perhaps larger numbers of people, and some of them will come and they will not have a single follower. Some of them with just one follower, 2 followers. So if this is, and these are the prophets of Allah Azza wa Jal, and remember that these prophets, their prophethood was established and proven by way of ayat and barahin, by way of signs and evidences that were shown to establish that this is a genuine prophet of Allah. So alongside that, even not a single one of their followers, in the case of those prophets, not a single one of them actually followed him, despite seeing these signs. So if that is the case, then how about you? When you are there in your house, in your family, your brother's a Tablighi, your uncle is a Tahriri, your so-and-so is a Sufi, this is that, and you're surrounded by these types of people, or you're in your society, or in your town or society, everyone is upon a particular way, everyone is upon hawa. Don't despair. Think about these prophets and these messengers of Allah. They were given ayat, things which were like miracles to prove that they were being truthful. And despite that, no one from their family, from their relatives, from their society that they live in, not a single one of them followed them. So why should you feel despair and feel? Don't feel despair. As long as you are upon the haqq, then those who choose misguidance will not be able to harm you. So this is a second point that the Shaykh mentions in order to make us have some reassurance. Then he also mentions, he talks about the point that we should not be deceived by large numbers, because truth is not known by large numbers. Truth is known by arriving at the truth. And so he mentions the hadith of splitting, and how those who will be saved from the hellfire are those who are the jama'ah. And the jama'ah is explained by Ibn Mas'ud. He said, al-jama'atu ma wafaqa al-haq wa in kunta wahdak. The jama'ah is whatever is the truth, even if you are alone. If you are alone, you're upon the truth, then you are the one who is the jama'ah. So we see that there are people who are trying to undermine these types of texts that we see, the hadith of the 73 sects. There are misguided people present today who are misguided upon knowledge, meaning that they know that they are upon misguidance. People like Yasir Qadi, for example, and other than them. You see from these groups, it's a bit like, it's like the Salaf said, Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu is a sitr, he is a covering for the companions. So whoever attacks Muawiyah, whoever speaks against Muawiyah, then he actually desires to speak about the companions, right? There are certain things that we can very, very clearly see about a person. If we see a person speaking ill of Muawiyah, we know that he's actually trying to speak about the companions as a whole, right? And so there are certain criteria that we have been given that we can immediately recognize what this person is trying to do. So in a similar manner, when you see that there are certain people who come about and you see what they're trying to do is they're trying to undermine the ahadith which speak about the splitting of this Muslim nation and splitting into various groups and parties. And this is from the signs of the truthfulness of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, that he informed things about his nation which is clear evidence that he was given ilm from his Lord. And from those hundreds and hundreds of instances, from them is this instance of the hadith of splitting. And so you see these people present, they are trying to undermine this hadith and try to say it is inauthentic, and they go into all the technical discussions and things like that. Straight away when we look at them doing what they're doing, the matter is clear. We know exactly what they're trying to do. They have an underlying methodology that they are upon. And indirectly they're trying to support that methodology of falsehood by undermining these texts, right? The same as what the Jahmiyyah were doing back in that time. They were trying to undermine the ahadith of the Messenger of Allah which relate to the attributes, because they didn't like those ahadith, because they went against their false creed and their false methodology. So they laid down principles and false foundations which were innovated, that we only accept ahad hadith. We don't accept the majaz, the allegorical things. They made these principles, the Mu'tazila, they invented these principles. The aim was to undermine these texts in order to support their false methodology. So similarly, there are people who hate and dislike these texts. The Jahmiyyah, when you read the ayat of the sifat or the ahadith of the sifat, it actually enrages them, and they become angry at these texts. And likewise, these people today who oppose the Salafi methodology, when you read these texts to them, it enrages them, because these texts go against whatever program or methodology they have in mind, which they have invented from themselves, which is not from the way of the Salaf. So the Shaykh says that the Jama'ah is not the Jama'ah of Hassan al-Banna or Ikhwan al-Muslimin, or the false understandings of the Jama'ah that they basically speak about. The Jama'ah is whatever agrees with the truth. So if you are a Salafi, you are upon the way of the Salaf in your town, in your city, and everyone else is a Rafidi, Shi'i, Sufi, Jahmi, Mu'tazili, Ash'ari, whatever else, you are one person, you are the Jama'ah. You are the Jama'ah because you are sticking to the Jama'ah of the Sahaba. That is the asl. The asl of the Jama'ah, which it returns back to, is the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, because they were the first Jama'ah to be united upon the haqq. So everyone who is with them and upon what they're upon, he is from the Jama'ah. The Jama'ah is not a political party. It is not a club. It is not a revolutionary movement. This is not the meaning of Jama'ah. Right? This is not the local Amir or things of that nature which we find amongst the rather the Jama'ah, ma wafaq al-haq, whatever agrees with the truth. The Shaykh emphasizes that point. And then the third point that he mentions to us in order to console us is the third thing that we remember is the narration which some of the people of knowledge, they declare it to be an authentic hadith, and some of them relate it to be an athar, but it is the statement يحمل هذا العلم من كل خلف عدوله ينفون عنه تحريف الغالين وانتحال المبطلين وتأويل الجاهلين. This knowledge will be carried in every generation by the trustworthy ones. They will remove from it the distortions of those who exaggerate and the fabrications of the falsifiers and the false interpretations of the ignorant. So this means that Allah Azza wa Jal will establish in all times, in all places, scholars who will perform this role of protecting and preserving the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so we are consoled that we know and we can turn to and identify such people. This is why we can say today that in our era, in our time, there is Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, and Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, and Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, and then likewise the various other scholars, Shaykh Ahmad al-Najmi, Shaykh Muqbil, Shaykh Zayd al-Madkhali, Shaykh Rabi', Shaykh al-Fawzan, and so on and so forth. There are scholars that we can turn to. We know clearly and manifestly from their speech and action that they are upon the truth and they clarify the truth. So we have scholars that we can basically turn to. And this reminds us of another hadith, in fact, of Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, a tremendous hadith in which the Messenger of Allah, he said, it's related by Muslim and also by Imam Ahmad, مَا مِن نَبِيٍّ بَعَثَهُ اللَّهُ فِي أُمَّةٍ قَبْلِ إِلَّا كَانَ لَهُ مِنْ أُمَّتِهِ حَوَارِيِّينَ وَأَصْحَابٍ. There was no prophet that Allah sent to a nation before me except that there was from amongst his nation helpers and companions. Helpers and companions. يَأْخُذُونَ بِسُنَّتِهِ وَيَقْتَدُونَ بِأَمْرِهِ. They would take from his sunnah and they would follow his command. Right? So they were from the people, they were from every single prophet, every single that Allah sent. So for example, Musa alayhi salam had companions and helpers, Isa alayhi salam had companions and helpers. They were taken from the sunnah and they were abiding by the command. ثُمَّ إِنَّهَا تَخْلُفُ مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ خُلُوفٌ. Then after them there appeared generations. يَقُولُونَ مَا لَا يَفْعَلُونَ. They would say things that they would not do. وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا لَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. And they would do things that they were not commanded with. So whoever فَمَنْ جَاهَدَهُمْ بِيَدِهِ فَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ وَمَنْ جَاهَدَهُمْ بِلِسَانِهِ فَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ وَمَنْ جَاهَدَهُمْ بِقَلْبِهِ فَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ وَلَيْسَ وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ حَبَّةَ خَرْدَلٍ. So he said, and then after them came a people, they began to say that which they didn't do. Right? So they wouldn't act upon the knowledge. And then they began to do that which they were not commanded. So then they began to act upon ignorance. And so whoever strives against them with his hand is a believer. Whoever strives against them with his tongue is a believer. Whoever strives against them with his heart is a believer. And there is not beyond that a seed's weight of iman. If you reflect upon this hadith, you will see that here is described the traits which are mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. There are those who do what they who say what they do not do. They don't act upon the ilm. When you do not act upon the ilm, this brings upon the anger of Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is the sifat overwhelmingly amongst the Yahud. And then there are those who do what they were not commanded. They do what they were not commanded. So this is like acting upon ignorance in the absence of knowledge. And this is the attribute or the overwhelming trait or the quality of the Nasara, the Christians. They acted upon ignorance and knowledge. So these traits which are mentioned here in this hadith, the hadith is telling us that every prophet who was sent, he initially had some followers, and then after those generations passed away, that nation, it acquired two traits and two characteristics. One characteristic was that they failed to abide by the knowledge which they had, and the other characteristic is that they began to act upon ignorance. They began to innovate things into the religion upon other than knowledge. And so in other words, this now is a warning against following the traits of the Yahud and the Nasara, and this happened in every nation. So the point being that, again, linking this to what came before, those who are the Hawariyun and the Ansar, the helpers and the aiders, they are the ones whom we are sticking to and following. Why? Because they are the ones who are favored by Allah, because they are the ones who combine between ilm and amal. So as you can see, there's a recurring theme in everything that we've mentioned so far, from the beginning, from the statement of the scholars, from the Lajnatul Da'imah to the point that we are at now. Right? That we are combining ilm with amal, and that there are scholars who call to that upon basira, and that we are upon that way. And so long as we are upon that way, then we are not hurt or harmed by the large number of opposers and the large number of people who oppose that way.